In today's tutorial, I'm going to be walking you through how to draw and paint an Our Lady of Sorrows heart. We celebrate Our Lady of Sorrows on September 15th, and I'm going to show you how to draw the heart with pencil and how to paint it using watercolors. For this project, you need a piece of watercolor paper, some masking tape, and a board that you can tape it on. You need a pencil, some watercolor paints, a paper towel, water, brushes, and if you'd like, you can have a ruler, a pencil, and some gold paint on hand. I also have other watercolor Sacred Heart tutorials here on my channel, and I'll link those in the description. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to use our pencil to sketch out the drawing of our sorrowful heart. So we are going to start by putting in our heart, and I always like to start with this bottom point. So when I draw hearts, I like to start off with the two bumps that go on the top. And when I start putting those bumps in, it kind of reminds me of back when I was a little kid and I used to draw birds flying in like my sky. Kind of has like that look of like a simple flying bird, kind of like what lots of kids draw in their artwork. So you can make those bumps as big or as small as you want in your artwork. But once I get the bumps all sketched out just the way I want, then I can start to add in the bottom part of the heart. So I'm going to do one curved line that comes off towards the left, and I want to make sure that the bottom point of my heart lines up with that center. And I'm going to do the same thing on this opposite side. I'm going to add that angled line that comes down towards the bottom. And feel free to change up the style and look of your heart. You can make it wider, taller, you can do anatomical, whatever you choose is going to look really nice. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to be working on the flames of our heart. So I'm going to start and kind of work my way left to right. Kind of the shape of each part of the flames kind of reminds me of a curve like a letter S or like a question mark. So over here, over on this left side, I'm going to do a curved line, kind of like if I was drawing out a question mark. So it kind of comes up and around and touches my heart at the top, kind of like this. And I'm going to do another curve on top of it. So I'm starting at this point where I originally started my flame, and I'm kind of matching the curve like this, but I'm going to stop. And that's kind of creating the width. I want to do a longer flame kind of here in the center, so I can pick a spot kind of closer towards the middle of my heart, and I can put in another curved line, think kind of like question mark, but maybe this one I want to be a little bit different, so I can kind of move my pencil in and out like this and find somewhere to connect it to my first flame. I'm going to add another curve on this side, so I want my points of the flames to stay smaller, but I'm kind of matching the overall curve and making it wider to make that flame bigger. I'm going to add one more flame over here. This one's kind of going the opposite way, so the point of the flame is kind of curved more towards the right. So think backwards, question mark, or like if you were starting to draw out the letter S. So I'm going to do a curve, kind of like the top of the letter S, or a backwards question mark, and I'm going to connect it to the top point of my heart. And I want to connect this flame to my other, so I want to make sure that this one is nice and pointed over here on the edge, but maybe I kind of add a wavy line and find a way to connect it to the other flames of my heart. And you can see that this one is slightly different than this one. The nice thing is fire moves and moves around in different formations, and so whatever way your fire looks, that is okay because it's constantly moving and it's constantly changing. So those are my flames. I have really simple swords that I put in my example. You can change up the look if you wish, but there are 7 swords. So I put 3 over here on this left side, and I put 4 over here on this right side. If you want to, you could use something even like a ruler to kind of help you get a straight line. Otherwise, you can freehand it. But what you want to do is you want to take either your ruler or just your pencil, and you're just going to draw a straight line that touches your heart, something kind of like this. So I put 1 line there, and maybe I have space here that I want to put another sword. So I can either draw the line myself like this, or I could use a straight edge or a ruler if I wanted that to be extra straight. So I'm gonna just start off with a simple line anywhere that I want a sword to be piercing the heart, and I'm just gonna put 7 in different parts of my artwork. And you can angle them any direction that you wish. We're just keeping it simple for now. We can add more and more detail later on as we get further into the painting. Once I get my 7 lines placed in, I want to add another shorter line that's cutting across each of these. So kind of close to the top, I'm just going to add another line, and it kind of creates a cross shape. And for me, I did that intentionally, but you can change up the look and decorate these swords however you wish. But I'm just doing this shorter line that comes straight across, close to the top on all 7 of these swords. So those are all the details that I'm going to be adding in my sketch, but maybe you want your swords to be more intricate. Maybe you want to add extra flames, or maybe you want to put in some roses or some flowers coming across the heart. However you want to change it up is totally fine by me. I'm going to be matching this example, so I'm going to leave mine as is, and I'm going to set up my area for watercolors. So the next thing that we're going to be working on is filling in our heart. So if you feel like your pencil lines are too dark, you can always go in with an eraser and you can soften up the lines by lightly erasing them, or you can leave it as is. And what we're going to do is we are going to start to fill in our heart. So I'm going to be taking a big paintbrush and I'm going to load it up with some water from my cup. And I want to do some pinks and reds for my heart. So I'm going to grab some pink from my watercolor palette, and I'm going to start to fill in the shape of my heart with my paint. And my paper is dry, and so the paper is starting to absorb some of that color, and I had a lot of paint added to my paintbrush, so this brush does a really good job of kind of grabbing all of that color and spreading it around nice and even. So I could leave my heart like that, and that's going to be a nice looking heart, but I want to switch it up just a little bit. I want to add some other colors in there. So while the paint is still a little bit wet, I'm going to grab some more pinks and reds on my paintbrush, kind of grabbing them all at the same time, and I'm going to add some more color to this heart, kind of concentrating it around the edges. So because some of the paint on my paper is still a little bit wet, it is kind of mixing together, and wherever my paper is dry, I'm starting to get like this harsh edge over here. If I don't like the way that looks, I can clean off my brush and just have only water on it, and I can kind of paint on top of the wet paint to kind of soften that edge so it's not as obvious a transition. So I'm going to load up my brush with some more colors, and I'm going to add some more paint over here on this opposite side. And when I was working on the example for this painting project, something that was kind of a happy accident that happened was the way that my colors flowed on the paper. It created kind of like this line kind of coming down the middle, and it kind of reminded me of a broken heart, which I felt like was kind of perfect for the theme of this painting. So I could add more paint to my canvas, kind of concentrating it around this middle, making it a little bit darker, kind of like here. And I could try to recreate that to make it look like that heart is breaking. It's a little more split down the middle, kind of like this. And one of the things that I love about watercolor is it's really unpredictable. You just don't know how it's going to flow, what it's going to do. I'm already getting some interesting color changes over here on this edge, and I'm really liking the way that the paint is kind of bleeding and moving around. Another thing that can be fun to do is you can add more color, like a darker color, kind of close to where the swords are piercing the heart. So if you take a little bit of paint and you press it on top of your paint while the water is still a little bit wet, it kind of mixes with the colors that are still wet on your paper, and it kind of creates these interesting color changes and bleeds in your paper because it is flowing with the paints and water that is on your paper. Another thing that I love to do with watercolor is I love to use salt to create interesting color and texture. So if your paint is still wet, you can sprinkle a little bit of salt on top, and that salt, it's going to suck away some of the color, and it's going to create these interesting kind of crystallized patterns on your artwork. All right, so what we're going to be working on next is we're going to start to work on the colors of our flames. So I usually like to start with kind of like a light yellow color for my flames. So I'm going to load up my brush with some water, and I'm going to grab some yellows. So I'm going to start over here at the tips of the flames. That way I don't have to worry about my colors mixing in with the color of my heart. And I'm going to be working on filling in these parts of the flames. So I just have some wet paint on my brush, and I am slowly adding it in to fill in the colors of my flames. And I'm going to bring it down close to where my heart is, but I'm trying not to touch it too much yet. So the darker and deeper that I want these yellows in my flames to be, the more color that I want to have on my brush, the less water that I want to have. You could also kind of build up the layers of colors. You could add an extra coat of yellow if you wanted the yellow to be even darker than how it is. And if you wanted that yellow softer, you could dip your brush in some water and use more water on your brush to kind of thin out the yellow of your flames. So while this yellow paint is still wet, I want to do something called wet on wet, which is where you have wet paint and you add more wet paint color to the artwork to create some color changes. So I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to grab another color. I'm going to grab some of that pink that I used in the heart, and kind of close towards the bottom of the flames where my heart is touching, I'm just dropping some of that color right on top of the yellow close to the bottom. And wherever the paint is still wet, whether that's on my heart or on my flames, it's adding that pink that I'm adding to the flame color. And it kind of creates this interesting, almost like tie-dye kind of look. And I can add that to other parts of my flame as well. So the stronger I want that color to be, the more of that I can add to my brush, or I can add multiple layers of this color to my flames to kind of change up the color. And kind of like before with the heart, if you want to, you can grab more salt and you can sprinkle that onto your flames to create some interesting color changes too. So I have to wait for this to dry before I can start to work on the swords. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of fast forward ahead, and then I'll show you how you can add in the swords to your heart once everything is dry. So once your painting has dried, unless you want to add an extra layer of color or you want to smooth out any edges, like maybe, for example, the paint kind of dried in an interesting way and you want it to look a little bit softer, you can just take water on a clean paintbrush and you can just kind of paint over any of those harsh edges to kind of smooth things out, kind of like this. But once you have it all kind of the way you want, we're going to start to add in our swords. So I'm going to be doing just like really simple swords, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the swords in black watercolor first, and then later on I'm going to show you how you can use colored pencils on top of it to create some extra details. So I have a small detail brush and I am getting it really wet with water, and I'm adding a lot of water to my black paint. And I'm going to trace on top of these swords with my black on my small brush. So I'm just going to trace directly on top. So one thing to keep in mind is the harder you push, the thicker your lines are going to be, and the less you press, the thinner they're going to be. So I'm going to trace right on top of the pencil, like this. And I'm going to leave it like that, and then I'm going to move on to the next one. So once your swords are all nice and dry, you want to grab a colored pencil, and I'm going to be using white. So on top of the long, skinny part of my swords, I'm going to take a little bit of this white colored pencil and I'm going to color directly on top of the black, and I'm going to stop when I get to that straight across smaller part where the hilt of the sword is. So you of course could do different colors, you can make it more complex, but I'm just doing white directly on top of the black. And because the black is underneath, it kind of creates parts where the white is a little bit brighter and some parts where it kind of mixes with the black and looks a little bit more gray and darker. And for the hilt, I could leave them like that, or what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a small brush, I'm cleaning it off, and I'm going to grab some gold paint. And using the gold paint, I'm just going to paint directly on top of the hilt like this. You could also do this with colored pencil if you didn't want to do paint. And last but not least, I want to add some extra sparkle and gold. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my same paintbrush, I'm going to grab a lot of water, and I'm going to really water down my gold paint, which I have in this pile right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold my brush over my paper, and I am going to tap the back of the paintbrush, and what happens is that creates a nice controlled splatter of gold paint. And I like doing that because I love gold and I love things that are sparkly, but I also do it because it makes it look like the flame is kind of like sparking a little bit more intense. So I have those flame sparkles, and I can like really see how reflective and shiny that is if I turn my paper. So whenever you finish with your artwork, you want to go ahead and take the masking tape off. So the safest way to do that is to pull your masking tape at a slight angle away from your artwork. So what I mean by that is as you're pulling the masking tape off, you want to angle the tape away from your paper. That way, if the paper does rip, it's going to rip towards the edge of your paper and not towards your artwork. And this tape is coming up nice and easy, but better to be safe. And voila, so there is your finished sorrowful heart of Mary. If there's anything else that you wanted to add, like maybe you did want to go in and add some roses, you want to layer up the colors, feel free to make any changes that you wish. Thank you so much for following along. I would love to see how your paintings turned out. Feel free to tag me on social media. And if you're new to my channel, hi, welcome. My name is Amy Heyse, and I post new Catholic-inspired art tutorials here on my channel every week. Another way that you can help support my channel is through my Buy Me a Coffee page and art supply wish list. I want to remind you that you are loved, God loves you very much, and He loves your artwork very much. Thank you so much for following along, and I'll see you in the next video.